everyone. My name is Elizabeth Manns, and I'd like to welcome you to the April 4th Coalition Show. This is the February 10th, 2020 edition of the show. It is week 282 and the 254th show that we have done since the closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is, we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights and are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we put the emphasis on Article 23 at the start of the show, and we are a very light panel this day. We went from a record of 5 to 2 for this show. So Dick is going to do number 1 and number 2, and I get number 3 and number 4.
Okay. Number 1, everyone has the right to work, the free choice of employment, the just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family, his or her family, an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests. At this time, we also generally say thank you to Michael Putnam for airing our show on the radios at on Fridays at 6 p.m., I believe, on WMNBLP 107.1, which is the local access radio station. And I can tell you somebody hears it on that radio because a friend of mine at work mentioned she heard my voice over the radio this past week. She was listening
Yeah,
to
and
the
then
show.
also we have these bumper stickers, single payer, health care for all. If you need one, come find me. I have them.
Dick Sadie has them all.
Yeah. The other thing that, we're in February right now. It's February 10th, is that it?
Yes, it is.
February 10th. And so in March, it'll be the 6th anniversary of the illegal closing of the North Adams Regional Hospital. It closed in March of 2014, with just 3 days notice. 37,000 people lost access to a full-service hospital and inpatient beds. Our community struggles more than most with asthma, heart disease, mental illness, opioid addiction. In an independent healthcare assessment commissioned by the Department of Health showed that our community needs access to 18 to 21 medical, surgical, and 11 to 12 mental health beds in North County to meet our healthcare needs. So we're not going to let it go. We still want a full-service hospital in North County.
And that's why this sign is behind there to remind the citizens of North County what we've lost and what we are entitled to and should have back, which is a full-service hospital. And to recognize the BHS for all the nice ads in the paper. All the letters and the editors are not giving us the same level of care that they are giving to South County and Central County. We are expected to travel, whereas a distance in order to get the care, whereas the others have it far closer. We don't begrudge them that they have their care. We simply want the same care and the same access to it, ease of access.
And we adopted that as our focus as the April 4th Coalition when that happened, because there were 2 unions that were representative at the hospital that didn't have a say when they closed the hospital. There weren't even public hearings.
No,
The community didn't have a say either. But since that time, things have been eclipsed by our new occupant of the White House.
Yes, he sort of sucked all the oxygen out.
It's just, we're under attack. People are under attack.
Right. If you look at his budget, he even gutted Medicaid again.
The
So
new
he's
budget
going
that he
after-
proposed, I saw that.
And he took billions out of Medicaid.
But they
Again.
still kept the tax cuts for the rich.
Of course they kept the tax cuts for the rich. They're suffering, don't you know? If they done more than we are, obviously. And so forth.
In his wall, it says,
He needs billions more for his wall, the one that keeps falling down when the wind blows.
this article was in Common Dreams. It says, of by and for the 1%, Sanders condemns Trump's budget as an immoral document designed to hurt families.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely designed to hurt families, definitely designed to hurt anybody who's not in the 1%.
Yeah, it's just horrible.
It's kind of a turn back to the 1800s with the robber barons, where if you got sick, it was tough cookies,
Yeah,
or
so
if you couldn't take care of yourself, it was tough cookies. That it was, there was no sense of community or they didn't want a sense of community at all.
This is
among anybody.
on Common Dreams today, and it says, Trump's budget to propose savage cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security while hiking Pentagon and wall funds. The budget is Trump's pledge that as long as he stays in office, slashing Social Security, Medicaid, and whatever's left of the SNAP will remain a White House priority. This is by Jake Johnson, a staff of Common Dreams. It says, in just 2 days after vowing the White House will not be touching your Social Security or Medicare, in its budget proposal for fiscal year 2021, President Donald Trump on Monday is expected to unveil a $4.8 trillion blueprint that includes hundreds of billions in combined cuts to those programs over the next decade, deep reductions in the safety net spending, and a major increase in the Pentagon funding. The budget, quote, the budget reportedly includes destructive changes to Medicaid, SNAP, Social Security, and other assistance programs that help Americans make ends meet while extending his tax cuts for millionaires and wealthy corporations, said Representative John Yarmuth. So,
You know, and the problem is Social Security is something that the American public pays into the expectation that they're going to be taken care of, just as they do for Medicare. They pay in for Medicare. It's not like that, and so therefore that money should be reserved for those two purposes. It shouldn't be taken out because you can't get Congress to give you enough money for your wall. It shouldn't be taken out and gutted because you want to do favors for the rich. It's intended to be, it's reserved funds that the United States, every United States citizen is paying into in some fashion or another. For the most part, I certainly pay in even as a state employee into Medicare, and I would like Medicare to be there when I retire, but somehow I don't think it's going to be with the current administration's actions.
right, well, we're hoping that
I
the current administration won't be in office much longer. That's what we're hoping.
You know, and the American public should be very getting upset and angry about this, because this is something you have paid into. And you paid into it on a promise from the government that it would be there for you, not disappearing because the government can't afford something or that he can't get money for what he wants.
Now, we can't do videos.
No, we can't do videos
But we do
anymore.
have something from Robert Reich, you know, that my
Yes, we
wife
do.
found, and she sent me a copy of it, and it was like 10 ways to not get caught up in the anger, although you said we got to get angry and not.
No, I think the
It's how to-
10 ways is to, I want American public to be upset about something when a promise is being broken. I don't necessarily want them to go out and overthrow the U.S. government, but you have to have some passion for something.
Right.
You don't necessarily, but it doesn't have to dominate you.
Right. So these are suggestions from Robert Reich, and I don't know if you want to do the first one, and I'll do the second one, or.
So we're going to alternate? Okay,
Yeah.
I can do that. Robert Reich's first suggestion is don't use his name. And I totally agree with that one because he's an egomaniac. He wants to hear his name out there.
Right, and then number two, it's associated with number one. It says, remember, this is a regime, and he's not acting alone.
That's fairly obvious given the U.S. Senate's vote on impeachment.
Right, so it's
that
not
he's
just
acting.
one person,
No,
although
it's
he,
more.
that individual seems to draw the attention, again, because he loves the
Sycophants.
attention. Yeah,
He loves sycophants.
but he loves the attention too.
Yes, he does. Number 3, do not argue with those who support him. It doesn't work. Which is because they're in
Yeah,
the
it's
cult.
just anger. It's
It's
just
anger.
anger. You can't get past it. You know. Number 4 says focus on his policies, not his orangeness or his mental state. You know.
No, because, again, no one's going to admit that anything else is wrong, so you have to go with his policies, get them to
Right.
think about it, what
Right,
he's
and
doing.
that's what we were
not-
talking about, that budget, that
Right, that budget,
my wife starts calling him 45. Is that the number president he is?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
45, yes.
Yeah. I won't call him, Spike Lee calls him Agent Orange, but I guess I can't call him that.
But you could call him number 45.
45, I think. It says, keep your message
No, I've
positive.
got-
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry.
doing mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Number 5, keep your message positive. They want the country to be angry and fearful because this is the soil from which their darkest policies will grow. So as much, I guess I'm counting that one a little bit, but I do try to see the glass always as half full, as in this one, and not half empty, because I always believe change is possible, irregardless.
Right. I like to quote Dennis Kucinich, and I don't know where he got the quote from, but I really like it. And it was during all this terrorist campaign and everything. He said, a person of faith you can't walk in fear and faith at the same time. So don't be fearful. I think I'm trying to think, I was reading about the Shakers, and I think one of them had a saying, they were firm believers in God. I think they looked at something and they said, he made it, he loved it, he kept it, so just keep that confidence,
Yep. You've got number 6.
No more helpless, hopeless talk. Yeah.
Absolutely, because that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you're helpless and hopeless, you won't try to do anything.
Right. Accentuate the positive.
And accentuate the positive.
And there was an article that I wanted to share last week, and we didn't have time for it, but essentially what the woman was talking about was, and she used as a jumping point, Stephen Colbert, who is on the
CBS
late night show, and he was being interviewed by CNN reporter. I can't remember his name. His mother was real rich.
The guy with the white hair,
Yeah,
Anderson?
yeah, Anderson Cooper.
Sure.
And Anderson Cooper put this question to him because Colbert is a man of faith. He doesn't talk a lot about it, but he is. And he says, you're a man of faith, but you say you're thankful for your life, but your father and 2 brothers were killed in a car crash in a plane crash when you were 10 years old, and you say you're thankful for that. And he sort of said, well, I didn't want it to happen. I didn't want my fathers and brothers to die, but he said, if I'm going to accept this life, I have to be thankful for everything that comes, because everyone suffers and there's suffering. We have to somehow work beyond it.
Yeah.
And so this woman took as that inspiration how she could try to gain some positive aspects of having this person as president. What positive things have come into her life because of it? And she's a woman who owns a restaurant outside of Washington, D.C. that refused to serve one of his members of his cabinet when he came into the restaurant. But she started talking about the fact that, one, she learned a lot about the Constitution since he became president. The stuff that she learned in 5th grade now she's more familiar with, she remembers. She also has made a lot of friends that have stood up for immigrants, people that are less fortunate, that they have gotten together. And so she made a long list of the positive things that have come out of the resistance to this. So there are things that you can stay positive with this.
Definitely. Number 7, support artists and the arts.
Now, why do you think that's in there?
I presume because you have to remember that life is beautiful and there are beautiful things all around you, and that not everything is about what's happening to you. Our artists always draw you into a story and draw you away from yourself if they're being successful, because you're supposed to be, if you can look at that and see it as beautiful, regardless of what you think is beautiful, as long as something touches you that's from beyond you, it pulls you out of yourself. It takes you away and realize that there's more to life
Yeah, I think you're
than
right.
what people tell you.
So number 8, be careful not to spread fake news. Check it. And that reminded me, we had our book on tyranny by Timothy Snyder, and he had the 12 lessons from the 20th century. And that's one thing I'm thankful for, that I got to meet
Got to
Timothy
read Snyder.
Snyder's book, and it's very good. And one of the 20 things was believe in the truth, and that was be kind to our language, very similar. Number one, another one, 11, investigate.
Right.
And I think those all seem to fit in with
Be
not
to spread.
not falling into the fake news
Check it.
check-in. I mean, and that it's like so many things that 45 has talked about. You know, it becomes part of the lexicon. It's even jokes, fake news. You
Right.
know, it becomes a joke, and it's really.
Right, and also I think number 8 encourages you to use your brain, to think. That to not just, because it's easy to go up on Facebook and find things, or it's easy to read a Twitter feed and think, oh, that's it, you know, or to believe in things. And it's just as easy to put, as the past election has shown, and the 2016, everything, people are easily manipulated or fooled if they don't look, if you don't pay attention. You know, does that make sense to you in your own head, what you just heard or read or said? Now it's amped up so much that it's almost a norm. So you really have to work even harder to say, is that
Investigate.
Okay,
You
so you
gotta
have to investigate for it.
Reliable sources, read many of them.
Yep. Number 9, which leads to your number 10, is take care of yourselves and
Number 10, resist.
resist.
Yeah, be courageous. That's, you know, resist.
Resist.
So in talking about that, in talking about resisting, it reminds me, I brought in a clipboard here because I heard a news story on the radio that there's going to be a trial of some of the people that are housed down in Guantanamo
Right.
Bay. But one of the things that's holding it up is they're claiming that they were tortured. And if it's true that they were tortured, then all the evidence that was gotten
Got from them was-
during the torture
is questionable.
inadmissible. So it's come up again. And back then, when the torture first came out, you know, Amnesty International asked people across the country to take part in a teach-in. And I participate. I ran a teach-in. I mean, not that I'm an expert on torture, but it sort of helped me. And I came across the notes, and I thought it might be good because we have when the Obama administration came in, they more or less said, we're not going to look back, we're going to move forward, we're just going to stop torture. And he tried to close Guantanamo, but the Republicans would not allow him to do that. He tried to do it. But so I have this flip chart,
Okay.
and I'm going to try to go over
I just did what Sheila asked.
the teach-in goals. You spark a daily, the goal is to spark a dialogue around torture and ill treatment in the context of the U.S.-led war on terror and humanize the issue. B is to educate ourselves on the scope of the use of torture and the ill treatment by agents of the U.S. government, mostly the CIA. The FBI wouldn't participate under
Right.
Bob Mueller. He would not let them violate the Constitution. Educate ourselves on what federal and international law has to say about torture and ill treatment. Indeed, move ourselves to take action and provide us with tangible opportunities to act. So I'm going to try to go through this a little bit. There are 3 generally broad categories of opposition to torture. Number 1, it's easy to remember, it's immoral. Number 2, torture is illegal.
It's illegal.
And number 3, it's ineffective, unreliable, and counterproductive.
And
You
there
get
is-
information, but it's not reliable information, because when someone thinks they're dying and they think you want certain information, they'll give you whatever you want to
Want to
hear,
hear.
even if they don't have that information.
Just to get the pain to stop.
The scope of it, in facts and scope, is where this torture took place with Guantanamo, Afghanistan, Iraq, black sites, ghost detainees. There was extraordinary rendition where they would kidnap people. There are many different kinds of abuses that have been alleged by former and current detainees in the U.S. detention centers around the world. Can anyone name one or more of these abuses?
I remember the waterboarding.
Waterboarding, yes, that'll be good. It says, how did this happen? Has anyone been held accountable? And
Not to
right-
date.
Not to date.
They-
Then U.S. obligations under international law and federal statutes. Can anyone name the laws that apply to torture and ill treatment, either federal or international? And then we list them.
Oh, okay.
And
I wouldn't have
one,
known that.
the United States Bill of Rights, 1789, Amendment 8, nor shall cruel or unusual punishment be inflicted.
Correct. I remember
And
that.
then B, the federal anti-torture statute from 1994. And then C, War Crimes Act of 1996.
I remember the
D,
Geneva Convention.
The
Yeah.
Geneva Conventions, 1949, Common Article 3. E, the UN Convention Against Torture, 1984. F, the Federal Anti-Torture Amendment of the Department of Defense,
December 2000.
Appropriations Bill, December 2005. And then the military regulations around torture and ill treatment, the Army Field Manual. It's against the rules.
Not supposed to do it.
The goals and action plan, Congress should establish a full and independent commission to conduct public investigations into the abuse reported of torture and abuse in the U.S. Pass legislation that would end extraordinary rendition. And you can sign up to, there's a bunch of things that you could sign up to do. You could sign petitions or whatever. But that was more or less an overview of what that teaching was. I know I went through it really fast, but the big thing I want people to remember about torture, and that I try to remember, is that it's illegal, immoral, and ineffective. You know, and there's no more we need to know about it. It's
Absolutely.
dehumanizing. And it not only dehumanizes the person who's being tortured,
But the torturer.
it
does,
yeah,
because you're not acting. You have, if you can perceive, because the minute you step outside and say, it desensitizes you to that person in the other room with you. If you're, in order to torture, you have to be able to shut that off, and then you stop being human. Because now you're no different than any other. It's almost like being an animal at that point, because your conscience isn't acting.
right, yeah, and you have to degrade people that you know, that they're not human anymore. They have to be another. They're not.
Right.
We fail to see their human aspects.
Which is why everybody, they put the emphasis on making you see the person as human. That's why every major fight is about getting to recognize people as human.
The basic human rights.
The basic human rights about it. And it's a sad thing then, when greed or need or want becomes so great, or fear, we forget.
Right. So moving from that heavy topic of torture, it's because it's
Yes.
not easy to talk about. I want to lighten it up a little bit, because I was listening to the radio last night, and there's this, on the public radio station, there's a story about food usually. It talks about different types of food, where they come from or whatever. But it had a short little story about, they had a woman who's been studying this, about the history of lunch.
Oh, the history of lunch, okay.
You know, about lunch break, how lunch break used to be an hour. I was talking to my granddaughter just today about how when I went to school, we would walk to school. I went
Correct.
to Haskins School. I lived on Furnace Street. We'd walk to school.
Walk home for lunch.
And then for lunch, you'd walk home.
Yep.
And they looked at me and says, why didn't you eat in the cafeteria? I said, only for kids who took a bus would they take. But if you were a walking distance, you went home for lunch. And then you walked back to school. But it used to be.
I remember that. I used to do that from
Right.
Bartlett, because it was only like 5-minute walk.
Right. It used to, you know, most jobs, it used to be an hour lunch. You know, you'd actually take a
Good.
break. Even in Europe, very European was, you know, almost a siesta break. You know,
Oh,
they still.
Europe, you still get the siesta break.
Yeah.
It'd be 2 hours. You have to go back to work.
Right, but
for
I think that's
but-
kind of disappearing. It's just.
It's fading.
It's
yeah.
just, we're dehumanizing work. Everything's about production, making things more.
Making more and
More profit or whatever, and cutting out. But the health implications, and they even talked about, she even talked about nurses. When people are reduced from having a full hour lunch to maybe a half hour or 20 minutes. You're really just woofing the food down.
Right, you're
And
not looking at it, you're not enjoying it.
Right, and
you're
that's
not
one of the things
tasting.
she said exactly is, if you have an hour for lunch, you sit down, you actually look at the food you're eating, and that's part of the eating process, is looking at what you're eating and taking time to do that. But then she mentioned about nurses and healthcare, because people like to make fun of how a lot of people that are in the healthcare industry are obese. And they don't understand that. But she says it has a lot to do with the fact that they don't get any breaks.
Right.
And they're not eating
Comfortably.
properly because they're having to go to a vending machine
Or to a fast food restaurant if you're lucky.
right.
If you happen to get time to actually leave, or you're going down to your cafeteria in the hospital to eat.
So it's just a very simple thing, but
dumb.
you don't
think
has
about
it
it, no.
gone? Why do we have to live in a society where, just taking it? I mean, and I know that some people, when trying to impress their bosses, to
work
make
right
their
through
time,
it.
they work right through their lunch, which is illegal. The National Fair Labor Standards Act saying you have to be paid. You have to work. You can't work without being paid. You can't work off the clock. So if you work an 8-hour day and you're automatically deducted a half-hour lunch, if you don't take that lunch, you're working.
Right, you should be being paid
You should
for it.
be paid for that lunch.
Correct.
Or if you're doing anything, if Michael was here, you'd explain if you were required to take phone calls or whatever, it should
you're on
be
the
a
clock.
paid lunch.
Right.
Because if you are on call during that period and you're required to do some function of work, then you're really not having a lunch.
Right, and Massachusetts law also requires that if you work 6 hours, you're entitled to 30 minutes unpaid lunch, simply because you need it. You need to get food into your body
Right.
just to sustain your ability to work and to be healthy.
Right.
And whether it's a lunch you control and you bring in, or you go out for lunch. I'm lucky enough to be able to drive home
Right.
and have lunch. It's intended to be time with my boyfriend at the same time as
Well, the woman who was doing the show was encouraging people, if you take the time, even prepare more food the night before and pack yourself a good, healthy lunch.
Yes.
So you can at least, during the time that you have for lunch, that you can enjoy it and take pride in it. But we went through this.
We almost went through the
30
30 minutes
minutes.
all by ourselves. Isn't
Yeah.
this amazing?
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
We got to remember to remind people that the New Hampshire primary is coming up tomorrow.
Yeah. And our primary is coming up in March.
Right.
So
We're part of we're not Super Tuesday,
yeah,
right? We're
we
March,
are.
the first Tuesday in March.
I'm not sure, but we're voting
Well,
soon.
we'll know by next week. We'll be voting soon.
And do your research. Listen to the candidates and make your choices. I'm
like
sort of
Stall.
taking all of the above. I'll take all
of the above. We'll take any candidate that comes out of there. I don't actually have a favorite at
Power
this point.
to the people.
See you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Learned with workers' blood, mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud, war's always been the bosses' way, sir. The union forever defending our rights, down with the black leg, all workers unite, with our brothers and our sisters in many far-off lands. There is power in our union. Now I long for the morning that they realise brutality and unjust laws cannot defeat us. But who